Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about affirmative action and more race than gender on this essay at least. Affirmative action, it's supposed to be, or originally was conceived in the very beginning as a way to help minorities, blacks, for example, do better at school and do better in getting jobs and getting promotions and so on. So it was meant to sort of facilitate or encourage that. Some of the earlier conversations that I remember were, well, if we can create a sort of fast track, if you like, create a black middle class, then that will have a sort of a spontaneous combustion effect, and suddenly there'll be a black middle class everywhere, because the reason black people are being held back is because of racism and because of the very negative views white people hold about blacks and so on, and these negative views are all unjustified and so on and so forth. Now, even as a young guy, I could see the many flaws in that approach. But I thought, again, I'm talking to I'm probably in college by now. No, probably senior high school actually. I still took the view, even at that time, so well, shouldn't the money, as in the affirmative action program, shouldn't they concentrate on the brighter kids in the same way that scholarships were given to white kids on the basis that they were bright kids who maybe didn't have their family didn't have much money, and so scholarships were provided to bright kids from poorer families so they could attend college or even stay on at senior high school and those sorts of things. So I imagined that if they wanted to help the black people, and it wasn't an issue really in Australia, or certainly nowhere near to the extent it was in the United States, that shouldn't they concentrate on the brightest black kids? And if they were kids that really showed some promise and some brain power and some aptitude, that they should be given opportunities, and that would create a merit-based, targeting scholarships at the brighter black kids. That would develop a merit-based middle class. It wasn't really adopted because it was going to take too long, and there just weren't enough. It was deemed that there just weren't enough sort of bright black kids to support with scholarships. So that sort of didn't really get going. But I always had the view that, well, if affirmative action, if it really works, not just delivering for the individual, but if the next black kid that's given a leg up through affirmative action, maybe that's going to be the person that finds the cure for cancer or something like that, or develops the next space rocket to go into another galaxy, then affirmative action is a good thing, if indeed it delivers on anything at all. So let's have a look at that, because I've got a classic case. I was going back some years when black people, when the mass migration was starting to move along, and there was a number of black people coming into, not a lot, but coming to Australia, and at the time I was working for organisation as the EVP, and we had offices in the United States and that sort of thing. So I was getting leaned on quite heavily to employ black people, and so I never had. I was one of these, because I've done so much travel and been in so many places in the world. I never really had a problem with that. If the black person was the best qualified, or they had certain suitabilities for the role. For example, if they were very irregular hours, but those irregular hours suited somebody, but they wouldn't suit someone else. So I was more than open to the idea, just that the black candidates were never, they were always the least qualified candidates when you'd interview them. If you did sort of think, okay, well, maybe I'll give this one a chance, that sort of thing. They were always had the worst attitude, and they didn't seem to give a shit. But anyway, coming to it, does affirmative action work? So I've got hired one of a few sort of black guys, but here's a guy. He's got 2 degrees. He's from New York. The single mother type thing. But he was given his, I'd say his IQ was probably about 90, 95 on a good day. So he was no genius. I wouldn't have supported somebody like that with an affirmative action program, because the likelihood of a person like that actually making a go of it is pretty slim. So you're putting resources into a low likelihood of success type person. But anyway, he's decent looking guy. He's personal physical fitness is important, so he does a lot of working out, that sort of stuff. So, but given his build and so he was more suited for debt collecting or working on the door of a rough nightclub or something like that. But anyway, he there was an opening for like a sales guy, and it was to go around selling to or talking to receptionists and that sort of thing. So, and junior purchasing officers. So there'd been a lot of young girls, and I thought, okay, well, this guy probably fit in there. The young girlies will go into a swoon over this big black dude and all that sort of stuff. So I figured, and he had a reasonably sort of friendly type of patter in his manner, the way he spoke. So, and he had these 2 degrees. Now, I was a little bit surprised, because when I sort of put him through, there was like a basic sort of written type admission type test. I'll use that too. And I realized that he was just barely literate when it came to the written word, at least, and his ability to put together something of even basic logical sequence was very limited. So I figured that he was okay. He's not a very bright guy, in other words. Yet somehow he was waved through junior high school, and this was a kid who would have flunked out of junior high school in a merit situation, gets waved into senior high school, waved through into college, and then waved through into a second degree. But he's being paid to do this. Like, there's even some sort of allowance, financial allowance, that they were giving his mother. So, because the argument was that he would need to go to work to earn money to support the family or something like that. So the government, in whether it's a state or a federal, I don't know what the deal was, but as he described it, the government was paying his mother and paying him to stay at school. So he was staying still only because it was the easiest option rather than the more difficult option. So he got his 2 degrees, which would be impossible for someone of his intellectual capacity. But anyway, so he's gifted. So affirmative action junior high school diploma, affirmative action senior high school diploma, affirmative action degree number 1, affirmative action degree number 2, and all paid for by the taxpayer. Now, again, so this is vast resources. He's being paid and gifted, over $100,000 just to stay at school. And for a guy that's not very bright anyway, I think that's a waste of money personally. But so does it work, given all these gifts he's been given? Now, on top of that, he leaves the United States. He's married this white girl, which he claims was always one of his ambitions. What's one of the tokens of success? Well, I want what the white guys have got. Well, what's that? Well, I want the nice house, and I want the nice car. I want the hot white chicks. I want all that. So sure, but not every white guy's got that. Only the better off white guys have that. So they're not. I don't want to be the white guy who's the street bum. I want to be the white guy who's got the really good job, who's got the hot chicks and so on. So they've got a very narrow view of what success is, and only want the sort of success that the most successful white guys are enjoying. So he's married the white chick, who's like a pole dancer or something, and so he's pretty pleased with that. That hey, I've achieved one of my ambitions. I've got the hot white chick. So now he had a real problem understanding sort of how productivity and work and responsibility and excuse me, and all that sort of things. He had real struggle with it. So he would arrive late. He would arrive not ready for work. He'd be like dressed in shorts and a t-shirt. Then he'd say he hadn't had time to have a shower because he'd had a big night out, and so they woke up late, and he didn't have time to have breakfast and shower. So he needed to go to the gym to have a workout and to have a shower, and he would get some, takeout, McDonald's or something like that. And then he would come back to work, and he was quite sort of, hey, that's just how it is. I had a big night out. I was having a good time. I slept in. So, that's just the reality of it. So I don't have to conform to your reality, white boy. You have to conform to mine. And my reality is whatever I decide it to be on any given day. And I was quite, surprised by this. I thought, well, there's no sensible person would ever take that view. But he was. And so I had to tell him that wouldn't work. Now, I was his boss's boss. So, but the team, or his direct boss and the people were aware that he was like an experiment, affirmative action hire type thing, and so nobody really wanted anything to do with him because they just thought, well, this is not realistic. It's kind of crazy in a way, but the board of directors were at the monthly board meetings where I had to go. I got beaten up for months on end for, why haven't you hired any black lesbians this month, Billy Bob, get onto it. So anyway, I gave them what they wanted. Now, I managed to get him to sort of turn up for work, about 9 o'clock. But when he'd arrive, he'd want to tell stories about the night out that he'd been on and what he'd done. And he was quite a good sort of, like a street rap singer almost. He was quite good at telling sort of funny stories about the things he'd seen and encountered. And I sort of would imagine he'd learned this, Boys in the Hood and that type of thing, telling these stories. And he was quite good at it. And sometimes he would get some laughs from the people in the area that he was in, in the bullpen that he was in. But he would goof off for lunch, and he was also terribly jealous of his wife. So he would just decide to disappear, and then he would hide down the road from where his wife was working, whatever she was doing, because to make sure she wasn't, having an intimate relationship with someone else. So he would spy on her and needed time off to do that. It was very urgent for him and important for him. So he would take this. He would just goof off and just say, "Oh, I'm going to do that. I'm going to spy on my wife because she might be screwing around," and that would be his thing. And he was unrepentant on this. So he'd say, "Well, no, you just don't goof off from work. You've got to remember you're being paid to do a job." And that seemed to be a struggle for him. Well, I'm being paid, yeah, but do I have to really? Why can't I do what I want to do? And there was a certain sort of level of impulse in there that he was on, even after senior high school and two college degrees. He still had no sort of semblance of reality or responsibility to others or duty or obligation. None of these things seemed to he just couldn't seem to understand them. And he stared blankly at me and as sort of, I did my best because he was there. Like if a white guy behaved that way, I would have fired them. But because he was already there and the board of directors was on my back, I was prepared to put a lot of effort into it to try and make it work and try and get him to a point where he would accept his responsibilities and obligations and would do an effective job. Now, he didn't have to do the best job, but as long as he was getting 5 out of 10 or better in his job, I was prepared to say, well, that's a win. But it was no easy. In fact, we never got there. It was no easy task. Now, the other thing or one of a number of things was he, in spite again of all this affirmative action help, he was forever, pretty much every night, certainly at least once a week, he would manage to find out someone who disrespected him or disrespected his wife, or had made a remark that he thought might have been disrespect or a sign of disrespect. So he was so touchy about noticing and disrespect and responding to it. So he was a pretty big guy. He was like, 6'3" and would have been 235, 240 pounds, or like 110, 115 kilograms, that sort of type of thing. So he's a big guy. But he would tell me about it. And he would tell me about it on the basis he thought that I would sympathise with his position. Yeah, we were in a queue somewhere. We were standing in line to get into a nightclub or a restaurant or something. And this guy brushed past my wife, and he pushed her. So I went up to him and I told him, "You come back and you apologise to my wife, or else." And the guy would say, "Get lost," and then, "Well, I'm going to take you out in the street and kick your ass." "Oh, yeah," and so on. So, and he would come around with these lumps on his face where he'd been in punch-ups, and fat lip, and and so on. And one time some guy had punched him in the ribs, and it was still hurting, and so he had to move carefully because his ribs were hurting. And so, but nearly every week, and I think it would have been every week, if not more than once a week, he was getting into some sort of punch-up, some sort of fight, on the basis that someone he figured might or did this sort of disrespect. But disrespect had to be dealt with full force. He had to go to the person and say, you better get on your knees and beg my forgiveness, or I'm going to beat the shit out of you, motherfucker. And he just took that view. I tried to explain to him, well, what will you achieve by that? What will you gain? Did the guy actually disrespect you? Do you think you can't be disrespected as often as you say? You don't get that many disrespects all in the space of 1 week. Now he was maybe going out to some places that were pretty seedy, but nonetheless, he had this thing about the disrespect, which is very much if he's still in New York, they'd be pulling out guns and shooting each other. Now remember, he wasn't in a black group, so it wasn't like there are loads of black people in a gang that are egging each other on or stirring each other up. He's like one black guy in a sea of white, but he still manages to find this disrespect is just everywhere, and not just disrespecting him, disrespecting his wife, disrespecting. He claimed that he had a fight with one guy because the guy disrespected his car. I'm thinking, holy fuck! I mean, I don't believe that. But this is the sort of thing it was, and he was constantly getting in trouble, and he was also borrowing money because he and his wife would smoke a lot of dope and do drugs and so on. So they're constantly running out of money. So he's having to borrow money from the loan sharks, and he couldn't pay that back. And the loan shark guys were coming around to the office to find him. So you'd see him suddenly running across the office, going outdoors onto the balcony, and jumping off the balcony, which was probably about 2 meters off the ground. Jumping off the balcony to run off and hide, so the loan shark guys wouldn't find him. All these things in sort of combination, and so it was a bit of a struggle. Now, also, I don't know if you've noticed with black people, or many of them, they've got the old African thing where if you talk quietly, that means you're plotting against somebody. It's like an old African custom. And if you ever go into a place where there's a lot of black people sitting down, they're all talking and shouting, almost talking very loudly. And so you don't know how each person hears the other one. But it's an old black African custom. If you're talking quietly, that means you're plotting. But if you're talking loudly, it means everyone can hear what you're saying. So obviously you're not plotting. So, and he still had this thing of talking loudly. So he was, in coming to the office, and he wanted to tell people about what he did or say something, he would talk in this booming voice that would and so people were saying, can you quieten down? Can you just lower the volume a bit? And so even some of the people in the office, if they asked him to, hey, do you mind? I'm working, this sort of thing. Even that he would perceive with disrespect, and he would threaten to beat some of them up. And they came to me and said, hey, Why do we have to put up with this? But the point I'm leading up to here in combination is the guy was unable to behave in anything remotely resembling a professional, business-like, office sort of working manner, and he was still behaving like a boy in the hood, even though he'd been given every advantage that a white kid in the same circumstances wouldn't have got. So in this, I'm leading up here, is the affirmative action failed comprehensively. It was an utter waste of money all over. Now, just on the simple matter of budgeting or living, guy was living well beyond his means, so he kept on pestering me for a pay rise, and not just a pay rise of a couple of bucks an hour, but like significant pay rises. And I tried to, well, why do you need a pay rise? Like, yeah, you're being paid reasonably well. You're not getting a shit salary, far from it. Your wife works, so why don't you? Oh, well, we wanted to have a nice apartment, so well, okay, we all want a nice apartment, but why do you have to live in one in that an expensive part of town like that? Oh, well, but it was a small apartment, and then we don't want to stay in the apartment because it's too small, so we go out to eat every night, and we eat out, we eat out for breakfast, we eat out for dinner, so it costs a lot, and we run out of money. Well, don't eat out then. Yeah, well, the apartment's really small. We don't like being in the small apartment, so we have to be out all the time. So you want to live in an expensive area of town, so you pay a lot for rent, but the apartment's small and you don't like living in that. So you go out into the street like they would in New York. They go out the street and sort of, they don't like to stay in their apartments there either in those sort of communities. So he's out, but he runs out of money. Now I'm trying to show him how to budget. And now he's not motivated to do this because the idea of the budgeting is, no, I want to do what makes me feel good. It makes me feel good to go out to it. It makes me feel good to do this. I feel good to do that. Why would I not do it if it makes me feel good? So I was trying to point out that the amount of money he was just spending on breakfast alone was him and his wife were spending $10, for example, $10 each on breakfast every morning. And so I said, well, that's that's like $600 for the month. 600, it can't be 600 because it's only $10 a day. No, but you've got 30 days in the month. So I try, add it up again. That's white boy mathematics. That's white boy arithmetic. No, that's bullshit. Add it up again. And very difficult for him to understand it. And so as hard as I tried to get him to behave in a way that would make his employment viable and make his own life viable and workable, just didn't really get anywhere. And now he wouldn't get those breaks in pretty much any other place. If it wasn't for the combination of me having a broad-minded view of I'll hire anybody who's who got what it takes, and the board of directors on my case, it wasn't for that, he wouldn't be indulged to this extent. But he's really had a dream run. This is a kid who, in the natural turn of events, would have dropped out of junior high school at 14 or 15, and that would have been the end of it. He'd have been a mean kid on the mean streets, getting by beating people up and shooting, having shootouts and that sort of thing. He was rescued from that, but only partially. He still actually behaved that way. The fact he was out of the New York scene was the only real difference. He still behaved in many ways like a street hood. He never gave me he never threatened me, and I could sometimes see the look on his face that he wouldn't have minded doing that. Hey, white boy, why don't you shut the fuck up? So, you could see that look there, but I think he did in some way understand I was trying to sort of make it all work, But in the end, the board of directors, the very people who pestered me to hire someone, they started pestering me to get rid of him, saying that he's obviously not working out, and if I see him walking around in t-shirt and shorts again at 9 o'clock in the morning, I'm gonna order you to dismiss him and this sort of thing. So I warned him about, look, I'm under a bit of pressure here, buddy, to you really need to start knuckling down and behaving responsibly, behaving sensibly. Otherwise, they're going to force my hand, or it'll be taken out of my hands, and you'll have to go. But he sort of took that as, oh, you're bluffing, or, well, I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm only doing what makes me feel good, and therefore it can't be wrong. So that's no, but I just wanted to talk about this because it indicates, firstly, the waste of resources in affirmative action, and also how even when vast affirmative action has been delivered, the guy's got 2 high school diplomas and 2 degrees that have been gifted to him by the affirmative action machine. And none of it's really made a difference. The difference it has made is really just to give him a sense of aspiration, really, to say, well, I want what the white boys have got. And other things too that I recall was his concept of a degree, getting a degree at college or university. It's not. He doesn't understand the education and the hard work to get the degree. That's something that's just beyond his comprehension. All that matters is he has that same bit of paper that the white boy has. So now I've got that bit of paper, the degree. The white boy's got the bit of paper. So I'm the same as the white boy because I got the same paper as he's got. Well, no, buddy, it doesn't quite work that way. He's the white. If you work hard and you study hard and you become competent in your area of expertise, whatever the degree is, then that'll give you that means that you're capable of learning, you're capable of applying yourself, and you have some knowledge and expertise relevant in that field. And then the degree is a certification that you have achieved that. That's what the degree is. He'd look at me sort of blankly and go, oh, well, no, hey, all I want is that bit of paper. Why should I have to do that hard work? Well, that's what white boys do. Why should I have to do that? So really, again, the affirmative action thing, it didn't change his view or his attitudes. He still had the attitude that why do I have to do that? That's white boy stuff. But without understanding what he needs to do to be successful. As I pointed out, given his combined income with his wife, he could have had a reasonable enough apartment. He could have had a nice enough car. He could have, had a decent enough. They could have gone out a bit, but not every night. And they could have done it right. But he wanted a lot. No, I want what the rich white boys have. I want all of it, and I want it now. And I don't want to have to wait sort of 5 minutes or 5 years or build up to it or work for it. Or I want it today, right now. And that was it. So in that sense, affirmative action just whetted his appetite for the trinkets and baubles of what rich people have. The hot white chick and the this and the that. But it didn't demonstrate to him, this is what you have to do to earn it. And this is where affirmative action falls down. It gifts degrees and diplomas to people without telling them this is, there are certain things you need to do to be able to get these things. And these bits of paper we're giving you are just free pass. It allows them to bypass the hard work necessary and the learning necessary, the application, the acceptance of responsibility, the acceptance of obligation. It allows the affirmative action people to just bypass that. So, well, I've got the bit of paper now, so I can have what that guy has. So it just whets appetites without demonstrating the disciplines necessary. You've been with Tastus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for listening.